Hey everybody, this is Ron from CM Trading. I want to welcome you to today's presentation of Trading the News. We're going to talk about today about trading the news specifically with Forex instruments. You can apply this idea to most trading instruments, but we're going to keep it to Forex pairs. First of all, before we get going, the most important thing you have to realize is that trading the news is very risky. Okay, this is not for the slight-hearted. You got to be very careful when trading the news. You could very quickly make a lot of money, but more likely than not, if you don't know what you're doing, you will lose a lot of money very quickly. So trading the news, it's very popular because there's a lot of action, a lot of movement going on, and that's everybody loves that. But it is very risky. So just keep that little warning in mind. And really, that's the point of this presentation, is to create like a strategy on how to trade the news without falling off the cliff and being able to manage our positions correctly. Okay, when it comes to trading the news, the first thing you should be doing is create scenarios. Okay, so first thing you do, you never really want to be in a position before important news comes out. If it's not that important, or if you have a really long-term long-term holdings, then it's not such a big deal. But if you're taking a short-term trade and you're holding position before news, then it's really just gambling, and you never know. You might make money, you might lose money, and that brings us back to this picture. So just be careful, be very careful about holding positions before news time if it's a short-term position. Okay. So that little introduction. So what we want to do is we want to be creating scenarios. We want to have an idea of what the news is, what could happen. So we have a 5-point plan over here. Okay, first of all, analyze the upcoming news. What does it mean to analyze the upcoming news? Is this important or not? If it is it something that's going to move the market or not? If it's not going to move the market, then you don't really want to be trading the news. If it's going to be moving the market, then then we have a trade to make. Okay, that's part one. Number two, what's going on? What's the trading action before the news comes out? Is the market selling off? If there's, for example, if there's news on the Australian dollar coming out, is Australian dollar getting weaker before the news is coming out, or is Australian dollar getting stronger before the news is coming out? That's very important for our strategy, so know what's going on before the news comes out. Number three, if it's rallying, if it's rallying before the news, then that probably means that there's expectations for a positive number. On the other hand, if something's falling, then that probably means that there's expectations for a bad number. So if we see something, if we know that there's expectations, if we know what the expectations are, going into the news, then that helps us plan our strategy. So we want to, first of all, know whether this news is important or not. What's the market doing before the news is coming out? And number three, what are the pre-news expectations from the market? Okay, based on that, we're going to create 4 and 5. So now we want to be able to determine. We're going to try to create we're going to try to create scenarios on what's going to happen if the news is better than expected, or number 5, what's going to happen if the news is going to be worse than expected. And then there's always also number 6. I didn't write this here, but it's also number 6 of what if as expected. We're not going to spend too much time with as expected, more on the what if it's better than expected or worse than expected. So based on our 2 and 3, whether the market is selling off and what their expectations are, we'll be able to build our scenarios for what 4 and 5 are. Okay, to help us create our expectations, we're going to take a look at also the technical analysis of the Forex pair that we're looking at. Okay, in that regard, we're going to look at what are the important support and resistance levels. Is the trading pair right now trading just above a support level? That's really important. Or is there a resistance level that if it trades above could create a breakout? So we want to look at the support and resistance, both the short term and the longer term of the Forex pair we're watching. Also, is the pair on a longer term uptrend or downtrend, or what's the, you know, it applies a little bit to number 2 over here if the market is rallying or not. But also on the technical side, when you look at charts, can you clearly see that there's an uptrend or a downtrend? Based on 1 and 2, we're going to try to determine whether, if there was a breakout as possible, if it moves above its support and resistance levels. For example, if there's bad news in a Forex instrument, would it cause the support to break, which could lead to even more selling pressure and then lead to a real breakdown lower? Okay. So number 3, could we have a breakout potential? Is there a potential for a breakout on the news? And the breakout for news would be dependent on number 1 and 2. And then number 4, we want to take a look at what happened on previous announcement from the country. Is the currency even following news? A lot of times we'll see currencies that really, aren't reacting so much to news. For example, we see the dollar yen. The yen will often kind of, not react so much. But the Nikkei index, but the stock exchange in Japan will react. So we have to look at overall, how is the currency reacting to news in general. If it doesn't react a lot, then we don't trade that currency on the news. Or maybe your currency that you're trading reacts to other countries' news. Like the non-farm payrolls in the U.S. is a mover for most instruments in general. Like you could have, what is the effect of the non-farm payrolls, the U.S. employment numbers and non-farm payrolls in the U.S.? What's that effect going to be on the pound or on the New Zealand dollar? And it could really have an effect on lots of currencies. So we want to have an idea. We want to go over those 4 lines. So just very quickly, we want to create our expectations. We want to know what's going on. We want to know if this news is important, what's the market doing before the news, and what could happen if there's better or worse than expected. So we're going to try to build those expectations, and then based on those expectations, we will have our strategy. Okay, so let's bring an example. This happened earlier this week on Wednesday, July 25th. We had the UK GDP numbers were worse than expected. They came out at negative 0.7% versus expectations of negative 0.2%. So this was a big miss for the UK GDP. So now, what would you have done before the number came out to trade the pound dollar? Okay, so let's look at a long-term chart over here. The longer-term chart of the pound dollar shows that we have this trading range in the pound dollar. So we had support at around 154.50 and resistance at 157.50. Okay, so our first answer is that really the pound, on the longer term, the pound dollar had been in a trading range. It wasn't in an uptrend. It was not in a downtrend on the long term. So long term, no trends, but it's in a range, and we have some nice support and resistance. Okay, so on the long-term chart now, we have an idea that maybe we could have a breakdown occur. If it trades below this level here, it could create a breakdown lower. Let's look at the short term. The short term, we saw going into the news that happened on July 25th, we had about 4 or 5 days of real weakness in the pound dollar. So we had a short-term downtrend, but the pound dollar was finding support right at its longer-term support level. So we have this, the long term. So the bottom yellow line is a long-term support. And we saw again that even though the pound dollar had been trading lower, it had found support at that level. Okay, so those are the items we have going into this news position. Okay, so based on that, we're going to create our pre-news analysis. So we have a short-term downtrend. We have short-term support 154.75. We also have a short-term resistance about 155.50. Okay, so that's what we have the short-term. Then long-term, we have this trading range and support at, here we'll put long-term trading range and support at 154.50. Okay, so we see that there's a lot of support at this level and this level over here. Okay, But overall, the pound dollar was trading lower on the overall dollar strength in the market. So so now that we have those analysis of what's going on in the pound dollar, we could create our scenarios. We want to create ideas of what could happen on better than expected. So if it's better than expected, there's a potential upside of a breakout if it trades above 155. We could see, or actually it should be 155.50. If it trades above 155.50, we could have potential of an upside breakout. But if the overall market stays weak, because the pound dollar has been trading around the overall market, then we could be a short candidate on any strength. Okay, so we have a potential of an up. So this is what I wrote on going to the news, going into the numbers, that there's a potential of an upside breakout. But if the overall market stays weak, then the pound dollar would probably trade with the overall market and would probably fall. If the numbers are worse than expected, then we have a potential breakdown. We could have a huge move lower if this 154 support is breached, right? We saw this long-term chart here. If that long-term support falls apart, then we could have a chance of a big breakdown. On the other hand, though, if we had bad news, and the support was holding on bad news, then that would show that this 154 level is really strong. So if the pound dollar keeps trading to this level and keeps bouncing off that support level, that means that there's a lot of buyers there. And that means that anytime the pound dollar keeps coming to 154.50, there's a lot of buyers jumping in. So if we know there's a lot of buyers jumping in, then there's a lot of demand. Okay, and what happens if it goes as expected? What if the news is as expected? So this is a real question mark. It can really go either way. It could go up, down. We'll probably just move with the market. Okay, so those are our scenarios. We have better than expected. We had a potential breakout, but it could be a sell on the strength type of play because of the overall weakness in the market. Worse than expected, it seems to be that our main thing here is the worse than expected. The worse than expected, then we have a potential breakdown if 154.50 is broken. Or if 154 is not broken on bad news, then that would show that demand is really strong, and that would potentially make a buy situation for us. Okay, so what happened, as we mentioned before, the news was worse than expected. It was negative 0.7 versus negative 0.2. It led to this nearly 100 pip drop in the pound dollar right as the news came out, so it falls. But even though there was this huge fall, we saw that 154.50 held. We saw that the support stayed strong there. So the fact that the 154 level stayed strong and the support held out means that there were buyers in the market. So that set up our scenario here, where we wrote that if support holds on bad news, and that would show that this 154.50 level is really strong. Okay, so now what we saw after the news came out, 154.50 held. We would have been shorting it if 154.50 broke, but since 154.50 held, then that means that there's a lot of demand and buyers in the market, and we'd be looking to buy on that support if we traded back down towards that trade. So there's a potential trade if it went to 154.75. And eventually that 154.50 continues to hold, and it actually led to a nice rally in the pound dollar as the market became better. Once there was a little bit of good news with the buyers already showing us that they were there, once there was a little bit of good news in the market, then it led to a quick move higher in the pound dollar, where it went up to 157. So once again, just to summarize what we spoke about today, we want to create pre-news analysis. We want to see if there's what the downtrends are, whether it's in a trend, whether it's support, resistance, what's the overall moves in this currency before the news comes out. And then based on that, we're going to create ourselves our different scenario. Just to conclude, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask any questions about this video presentation or any other video presentations, or any other questions about trading. Feel free to send them to dealing@cmtrading.com. We love to hear from everybody. And if you want to reach me directly, you can hit me up at Twitter @Ron Finberg. happy to answer any questions over there. Thanks for viewing today's presentation, and I want to wish you a wonderful day and good luck with all your trading.